Hi, I'm Carl Gould, and I'm a guest on The Root of All Success. Real conversations with the real Jason Duncan. We dive deep into what makes entrepreneurs successful. Hope you really enjoy it, and let us know how you enjoyed the podcast.
Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. A podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs unlocked success and how their stories can help you do the same. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason has built multi-million-dollar businesses that have been featured in Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazine. His life's mission now is helping entrepreneurs live what he calls #the exit lifestyle. Introducing TEDx speaker, mastermind leader, author, entrepreneur, cigar aficionado, motorcycle enthusiast, and host of The Root of All Success, the real Jason Duncan. The real Jason Duncan.
Welcome to another episode of the show. I am the real Jason Duncan. You can call me JD. I've got Carl Gould on the show today. He is a leading authority on leadership and entrepreneurship. He's a keynote speaker. He's a best-selling author. He has a company called 7 Stage Advisors, which he has worked with, helped launch 5,000 companies. He has mentored and coached over 30,000 CEOs. This guy has worked with people like Tony Robbins, Ken Blanchard, Stephen Covey, you name it. This guy has worked with all these people. He has a wealth of knowledge and information to share. He's even helped accredit and certify over 7,000 business coaches since 2002. He has 2 best-selling books. One is called The 7 Stages of Small Business Success, and the other one, his most recent book, is Biz Dev Done Right. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the real-world experience, about what it means to be coached, to coach, and his definition of success. I want you to pay attention to this. Please help me welcome Carl Gould to the show. Hey, Carl, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, I got to be on your show not too long ago, and now here you are on mine. You've got quite a bit of success under your belt working with people like Stephen Covey and Ken Blanchard, and written a lot of cool books, done a lot of great things. Why don't you start by just giving everybody, I know in the intro I gave a little bit of the history of what you've done, what you've accomplished, but tell everybody what it is that makes Carl. What are you doing these days?
Well, that's a wide open question. The lineage, or the short version, is that, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. I go to college for accounting and finance. I break my leg pretty badly in my second year of school, and I have to leave. Right. So there I am. I'm laying on my mom's couch, literally broken leg, been out of work and school for 6 months, broke. And now all of my student loans come in the mail, and I have to start paying those off. And I was like, broken leg, broken spirit. And now I'm thinking, I gotta figure this out. I went from going to college, feeling like I was on track for something, to now, my prospects were not all that great. And so I went into the one thing I knew how to do on my own and in a business, which was landscaping. So I started a design build landscape firm, and that really took off. I really enjoyed that, and got me into the entrepreneurial world. I was only 18 and a half years old, and when I got started. So I get started on that. That business doubled every year for 7 years until I sold it. So I go back to school at nights. I get a job bartending. And I'm starting to make my way a little bit. But a couple of years after that, in 1990, I started coaching with Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, Ken Blanchard, Dale Carnegie leadership, those sorts of things. And so I had a parallel track where I was coaching all through the 90s. Plus, I had a landscaping contracting firm, then soon to be a construction company. And then I sold in succession, the landscape company, the construction company, and then launched the business that I have today in 2002, which is 7 Stage Advisors.
So when you say you got into coaching with Tony and Ken and all those guys back in the 90s, were you actually working in their organizations as a coach, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so back then, their coaching was mostly there were a handful of gurus, and there were people that were certified to coach under their methodologies. So I was doing what they call crew leadership training, trainer, and coaching for in Tony Robbins' seminars and his events. And also, I got certified in DISC, the personality assessment, also
Right.
NLP. So I was doing some coaching on my own, but I also learned situational leadership by Ken Blanchard, leadership principles by Dale Carnegie, the Franklin Covey methodologies, and so I started to get every certification you can imagine in what were the premier or premium brands of the time. And so I was that certified coach that they talked about. I was that guy. Well, you're going to work with my team. Well, I was on that team in various forms. And then as the years went on, all through the 90s, I worked more and more intensely with those brands and then others until I launched my own in 2002.
So you had really a decade of working as a certified coach in other people's programs before you went out and started your own. Is that right?
Yeah, and I would still recommend it today. I borrowed somebody else's IP until I created my own. I
Yeah. Well,
coached
I
around
think
someone
that's
else's IP.
well, as King Solomon said, there is nothing new under the sun. I mean, it all is. It's already there. It's somebody packaged it up and put their name on it, and they put it
True,
out there. So,
true.
as a funny thing, I posted a quote on Instagram, on my page on Instagram, not too long ago, and my really good friend, who's also a member of my mastermind, et cetera, he goes, "Hey man, you're not going to give me credit for that?" And I was like, "Dude, I honestly couldn't remember who said it. I didn't take credit for it. I was just saying this is a good quote. I just didn't know where it came from." And he's like, "I said that." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm pretty sure other people said that before you too." so so it's been around a long time.
Yeah.
Now, I met Tony one time. I went to an event here in Nashville a few years ago, and dude's a beast of a man. I mean, I took a picture. He's standing towering over me, and he's got his hand kind of around my neck, like just kind of on my back, kind of. And I thought, if this dude sneezes, he's going to pop my head off. He's going to just pop it off
Yeah,
like a little
right.
pimple or something.
What was
Working with
interesting
Tony,
about that?
go ahead.
So what was interesting about that was in the mid 2000s, I was developing content for his company, and I actually spoke at his events, his Unleash the Power Within event, for 3 years. And we created a follow-up coaching session called the Breakthrough to Results. And I ran that, and I did most of those sessions. And the first question we would ask was, what was your favorite part of the seminar? And we thought the firewalking or this exercise or that exercise. The number one, by far and away, area of feedback we got or question was Tony's energy. How does he do it? He speaks 14 hours a day with no notes. When does the guy pee? I'm like, these were the questions we were getting. And I said, well, don't you want to talk a little bit more about your experience? And they were so curious about it because you're right. I still is a force of nature. And he's, of the things that he's done, one of the most impressive is he takes action and he gets others to take action. So that's really exciting about the work that he does.
What's interesting about Tony, and I don't talk too much about Tony, but I think it sets a good context for someone who may not know you first, that this is a guy you worked with, and now we do it. But I was never a huge fan of Tony Robbins. I wasn't a detractor or hater. I just wasn't a huge fan. It wasn't that I didn't like him. I just didn't know much about him. And it wasn't until I'm Not Your Guru came out, that on Netflix, that documentary, that I was like, whoa, this guy, this is legit. He's legit. So I started paying attention to him. And then he came to Nashville. It wasn't at one of his events. He was speaking at another event, but he spoke for 4 hours and 45 minutes without a break. And he told the story at the beginning when he came on stage. He showed up an hour and a half late. And he said, guys, this is the first event in 40 years or whatever, how many years, that I almost didn't make. I almost canceled because he had just had an ulcer in his heart or something. He just got back from London and he collapsed, and that's why he was late. And so he spoke for 4 hours and 45 minutes, like fresh off of the hospital. And then when we went in to meet him and have pictures afterwards, he was still very kind and engaging, but his whole body was vibrating just because he was still on this high. but an impressive guy. I would also be interested to answer the same questions that they did, because I think we just don't see humans who are able to do that. Besides Tony, who are some of the other people that you worked with during the 90s that we would all know that you're like, this guy was amazing, this is a good dude?
Well, there was a guy who wrote a book called The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. His name was T. Harv Eker.
Yeah,
And
read it.
so we did some work with T. Harv in developing his coaching programs. The largest organization, business mentoring organization in the world at the time was a company called the Institute for Independent Business, based in England. And we developed and ran their mentoring program, which became the farthest reaching mentoring program in the world and the fastest growing at the same time, from 2002 to 2013. And we also advised now what is the largest business coaching and peer-to-peer mentoring franchise in the world, called the Alternative Board, or TAB, as it's known in some countries. And so, yeah, so there's part of what I was in coaching in the early days. And like you said, there's nothing new under the sun. However, in the coaching industry, we've learned more about the human brain and peak performance over the last 30 years than ever. So it's an exciting time, because more and more is coming out about what defines peak performance. And so while there's nothing new under the sun, because it's always been there, we're just learning it. There's new distinctions that are coming out all the time. And so as that has developed, I was big on content creation, right? I was at one of Robbins's events, and I sat in the back, and he claimed that he was a coaching organization. And I said, I don't think so. I think you're a training and seminar company. And so their production team challenged me, like, no, I think we're a coaching company. I said, I'll prove it. And so I created a coaching program for them that still runs at their seminars. So I was really big in the content creation, white label coaching space. And so I was the architect behind a lot of the programs that you see. As a matter of fact, many of the masterminds that you know of today, that you might get, that you're involved in or you run, I helped launch what was considered to be ground zero for the masterminds of the time. Back in 2005, there's a guy by the name of Roger Salam who started something called the Winner's Circle. And a good friend of mine, John Goldman, and I, we ran all of those mastermind groups and helping Roger launch that company. And now many of the people that are known for mastermind groups were members at the time. Joel Bauer, Ron LeGrand, DC Fawcett, Jeff Adams, Ben Parkman, Jason Medley. I can go on, and Mike Calhoun. I can go on and on. They were all members at the time, and then they went out and built their mastermind companies. But that was kind of ground zero for what you know as masterminds today. So I'm really proud of the fact that the coaching and the mastermind and the mentoring, those three specifically, I was really able to contribute and shape what the industry does today.
Did you happen to know Mitch Russo? Did you know him?
I know Mitch very well.
Yeah. So Mitch and I are friends. He was my coach. I think I hired him in 21, maybe it was 21, to work with me for about 6 months on when I was launching my coaching company, kind of getting it off the ground. So Mitch I saw Mitch about 2 months ago in, where was I? Pensacola. So yeah, and I'll see Mitch again. I'm speaking at an event in New York in September next month. And
I'll see Mitch next week. As a matter of fact, we belong to the same mastermind group.
Yeah.
So funny story, going back to 2004, I was coaching Chet Holmes at the time, who was the author of The Ultimate Sales Machine. And Chet says, I want to get a deal with Tony Robbins. And I'm like, well, the way you're going about it, never going to happen. And so I worked with Chet very closely, and I'm coaching him over the next 2 years. And he landed a deal with Tony Robbins, which in the beginning was called the Business Breakthrough, which ultimately became Business Mastery. Well, Chet kept talking about this guy. I got this guy who runs my business. I got a guy. And I never really knew his name, but it was Mitch Russo.
Yeah.
Fast forward 20 years, and Mitch and I are sitting next to each other. We get talking, and Mitch said, yeah, I kept hearing about this guy I'm working, who's coaching me on strategy, and I kept saying, I'm hearing about this guy who's working with me on structure. And so that's how Mitch and I reconnected.
Yeah, well, you'll have to tell Mitch I said hello. He's a great guy.
I will do
and
that.
the reason, for those that don't know the connection now, if you didn't pick that up, Mitch and Chet and Tony all worked together back in the 90s to build what Carl's talking about. And that's why I asked that, because I figured, Carl, if you've been around back in the 90s, you probably knew Mitch, because Mitch was, I think he was the CEO of that division of the company for a while.
He ran the company, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And Mitch has been a guest on my show, so if you want to go back to the archives, you can check out the show where I interviewed Mitch. So let me ask you this, Carl. So you've got 7 Stage Advisors, which is your company now, and you have helped. You've built a lot of your own multi-million-dollar businesses. But what 7 Stage Advisors is doing is you're helping a lot of other businesses scale and build. So tell everybody a little bit about how it started and what you're doing.
So going back to the early days of the 90s, I was one of the very few business coaches. And so we should thank all the women out there for really growing and building what we know as the coaching industry today. Yeah. A guy by the name of Thomas Leonard was the pioneer of coaching as the industry that we know today. Tony Robbins was known as the guy who kind of coined the term coach, but it's really Thomas Leonard who sculpted the industry as we know it today. And when I started as a coach, it was 90% women. And again, we should thank women coaches for sculpting and growing the industry, because they really, really did grow it. And at the time, most coaching was life coaching, results coaching, of personal, emotional, and psychological. At the time, there weren't a lot of business coaches out there. So I was one of the original business coaches. And so I would keep getting all of the business clients, and they were stuck. Usually people go for coaching when something's not working. They've been trying to get something done. It's not working for them. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of systems. So I kept thinking, all right, why are they getting stuck? What's the deal here? And at the time, it was pretty standard practice that you would take a DISC assessment, a personality or behavioral assessment, psychometrics, and we would look at how are you naturally wired, what's your adaptation, and where can some of the trouble spots be? Well, over time, I learned that, wait a minute, there seems to be a corresponding business function to every quadrant of your personality. So if you seem to be really goal-driven, there's an execution part of your business. If you seem to be very promoter type and influencer type, that seems to correspond with sales and marketing. If you're a structured process type person, that seems to align with operations. And if you're really analytical and detail driven, you're in the compliance or accounting or finance department. And so we found that the personality of a business will mirror the personality of its owner. So what I started to do is I started to look at somebody's DISC personality and say, if I know, with 2 questions, I can understand your DISC, your individual personality. That will tell me where your strength is. And then your diagonal opposite quadrant is your blind spot. And so what I started to do was apply that to my clients and say, all right, you're an influencer type. You're good at sales and marketing. The diagonal opposite quadrant is finance. I wonder if that's an issue for you. And I was hitting it like that. And I was fixing problems very quickly for my clients. And so we were getting to the heart of the matter almost immediately. You're really analytical, you struggle with relationships. You're good process driven, you never cross the finish line. You're good at visionary, but you're not good at process. How did you know? Right? So we developed an assessment for a business as if it were a person. And what we were able to do very, very quickly was unlock 10 to 30% of growth in our clients' businesses immediately, regardless of currency, location, economic conditions, you name it. Culture didn't really matter. Once we found that 10 to 30% growth is just sitting there in your blind spot area. And if we can identify that and uncover it, then you can grow almost immediately just from that before you put in any other structures or processes or goals. And so that was a big area of focus for me very early on.
So I used to be DISC certified way back in the early 2000s. Haven't really done much with it in a long time since then. Why do you think DISC is not as popular as it was back then? Was it just the new thing, or what do you think?
DISC is basically the foundation for just about every assessment you've ever taken. But it's, people like things that are new. So you repackage them, the predictive index.
Enneagram.
Yeah, it's based on DISC. I keep going down the line, and they all have their basis. And it's not because the new assessments are uncreative or not innovative. It's just that it's based on humans. And the study of humans, we come from Earth. There's 4 building blocks of the universe. There's water, air, fire, and rock, Earth, right? And so we come from that. Our temperaments are based on that. Our behaviors are based on our temperaments. And then you can evolve from there, but its root is in those 4 personality quadrants.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
As an entrepreneur, I know that you have to deal with sales on a regular basis. I mean, every entrepreneur does. And if you aren't paying attention to sales as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be an entrepreneur for very long. But I've got a sponsor of this show called Dub that helps you bring the personal back to sales. If you want to figure out how to improve content creation, improve client trust, improve your sales process, decrease the sales cycle, because we all know time kills deals. If you want to increase client bookings and increase conversions, you need to take a look at Dub. There's a special offer for Dub for listeners to The Root of All Success at therealjasonduncan.com/Dub. And that's DUBB. What Dub does, I've been using this for years. I'm a huge fan, and I'm so honored that they're our primary sponsor of the podcast. But they have helped over 60,000 businesses around the world communicate better, to make sales easier, to make sales more personal. And Dub is built for growing teams. I mean, you can set up video emails, you can set up custom onboarding, you can do admin reporting, anything you need around video and sales and automation. Dub is there. You can try Dub now. Your conversions to sales are waiting. All you got to do is go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dub. And there you're going to get 2 weeks for free to try Dub. Plus, you're going to get 50% off your first 2 months of Dub. You can't beat that. So go check it out. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dub. 40 years ago, you weren't in business unless you had your business in the Yellow Pages. You remember those things? And 30 years ago, you weren't in business unless you had a door-to-door salesman. 20 years ago, you weren't in business unless you had a website. And today, you're not in business unless you're doing social media content. Am I right? Social media content. Social media content in the form of like micro content, which is 30 to 60 second spots on Instagram Reels or TikTok or YouTube Shorts. That's the way business is done. As a matter of fact, that may be how you found out about this podcast or me as a business coach. This medium that we're using today to communicate what we do is vitally important. And just recording yourself isn't enough. You've got to do it right. And my friends over at Story do it right. And one of the problems with doing it wrong is that you sit around thinking, well, what the heck am I going to record? What am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Like, I don't know what to talk about. Well, Story takes all of that away from you. Stop wasting time trying to come up with content, because Story will send you a video prompt on what to record. You can pick the categories you want to record in, whether it's real estate, entrepreneurship, finance, relationship, leadership, life insurance. It could be anything. Don't waste time on that. And by the way, if you're not confident in talking on video, or if the video editing portion takes up way too much of your time, Story will edit the videos to perform well on social media. They add the subtitles, the pop-ups, the zoom cuts. They remove all the filler words like and and. They remove the awkward pauses. And then they take that video and post it for you. They write the captions, they add the relevant hashtags, and they post it on the platforms that you care about the most. It's exactly what you need to be in business today and to be successful at it. So if you want to learn how to do social media the way the influencers do, you need to go to therealjasonduncan.com/story. And that's story with 2 Y's. Why? Because they're awesome. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/story. That's STORYY for 10% off your first 3 months to try Story out. You're going to thank me later.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
Well, so you've got a very successful background. You've built 3 multi-million-dollar businesses before you turned 40. You've got a couple of best-selling books. So if you had to take all of your success, all the things that you've been able to accomplish and distill it down to one key, like this one thing, if this is I know there's multiples, but like this is the one thing, what comes to mind as the number one key to your success?
Hustle.
Okay.
There is no substitute for it. You can't buy your way around it. You can't inherit it. The person who hustles, I have coached, at this point, I've coached over 30,000 CEOs. And I got to tell you, the most talented CEO is not the most successful CEO. I have some guys that are, have an Ivy League degree. I wouldn't trust to cut my lawn. Right. And then I've got guys that are dropouts, didn't, we're told they'll never amount to nothing. And they run 8, 9, and 10-figure businesses. And they are relentless. And when I say guys, men or women, but you have somebody who's got a passion for what they do, who believes in it and is willing to put the time and the effort and the work in. It's almost impossible to fail. As a matter of fact, when I was running the mentoring program for the Institute for Independent Business, their trainer, their lead residential business school trainer was a guy by the name of Ed Dolan. Ed used to post this statistic, and he would say, listen, you're launching your business. We're going to send you out on 60 appointments with business owners. Now, what you all want to know, how successful are you going to be? So he had this matrix. And he said, the probability of you being successful on your first 10 appointments is very low, right? Statistically, you might break the mold and you might be very successful. But on average, statistically, your chances of being very successful in the first 10 is very low. Your chances of being unsuccessful between 50 and 60 is almost nil if you work at it. In other words, if I send you out and I tell you to do something 50 times in a row, the chances that 51, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 60 that you won't be very successful at it is almost zero, because we're already successful people. We learn quick. We adapt. As a result, if you hustle, you get so in tune with what needs to be done and you get so good at it, right? What did Elon Musk say when he took over Tesla? He realized how badly they were manufacturing cars. And so to prove a point, he slept on the assembly line floor. But in other words, he immersed himself in it. And now he's thought of as one of the best manufacturing engineers in the world. He goes, guys, we build cars better than anybody at this point. Why? Because I slept on the damn floor. I immersed myself in it, and we didn't stop until we had it. Now, he's a smart guy, but he's not a smart manufacturer. He learned it. Whatever he was smart in before, he wasn't smart at Tesla. He got smart because he dove into it and he made it happen. And that's what I see more than anything else. You give me somebody who's committed, you could have everyone else. You just give me the committed, and I'll show you a 1%er.
So how do you, Carl, define that word success? What does that mean to you?
Success has a variety of, and it's somewhat objective, I guess. But for me, success is your life or business by design, on your terms. In other words, you get to do what you want, with whom you want, when you want, and it affords you the opportunity to do the things that you want in your life. I had a very successful landscaping company. It doubled every single year for 7 years, every year. And then I sold it. I needed another surgery on my leg. It was time. I was a young guy. I was in my mid-20s, but I was really struggling physically. Right? As successful as the business was, personally, I didn't feel as successful because it really wasn't my passion. I just needed to make money, and I was good at it. Right? And then I got into a construction business, and I hated it. I didn't like it from day one. Again, it was a successful business. It was a 7-figure business that we did very, very well. It was an 8-figure business over time. And but it wore me out. Like I was 35 years old and exhausted. Like I was just like dragging my ass to work every day. Then in 1996, I tell everyone around me, guys, I'm going to become a professional coach. And they said to me, really? Wow, that's awesome. What sport? I'm like, no. You don't get it. I'm going to be like a coach for your business. Like I'm going to take your business to the gym. And they were like, huh? Like it wasn't even a job yet, Jason. And so it was before it was really an industry like we know it today. So I started to slowly, I worked with a business mentor who helped me structure my business for sale. And then I ultimately sold that business in 2004, but I launched my coaching company before then. And I got to tell you, I have more energy for what I do today than I did 20 years ago. I love it. I could do it all day long. I often do. And, it just, I feel like I found my calling with what I do today.
Life by design, living it on your own terms, being able to do what you want, when you want, where you want, with whom you want, as often as you want. I love it. That is a definition that I can get on board with. Now, let me ask you this. So based on that definition, do you consider yourself to be successful?
Currently, yes. Currently. I can't say I was always successful in my life, but currently I feel successful because I'm living a life by design. Some days I don't feel successful. And there are certain things, there's always a certain percentage of your life where, you're dealing in the urgent and you're at the mercy of other people's demands. But there are imbalances that happen and you've got to sort those out, and they're always out there. If you're growing and part of a dynamic life and business, you're going to have those things. And I have them too. But I try to make them as temporary as possible, and I try to get through them. But overall, yes, I would consider myself a success.
So you've coached over 30,000 CEOs. You have helped launch over 5,000 businesses. You've coached and mentored people in 35 different countries. So you've had a lot of people that you've given advice to. So I want you to think about all the advice that you've given, and I want you to speak directly to the listener right now or the viewer on YouTube. I want you to say, this is the one piece of advice that you should follow. What's that?
The one piece of advice you have to get into your mind, it never goes away, it never stops, and it never actually gets easier or better. It is sales and marketing. You cannot, under any circumstances, stop selling and marketing your business for 1 minute of the rest of your life. That's why you have to I'm not a big, you got to do your passion guy. You got to like it enough to work through the really crappy days. Uh-huh. And you know how you get to like something? You get good at something. We tend to like what we're good at. We tend to get good at what we like. So either like something and go for it, or get good at something and you're going to find that you like it. So one thing you cannot, under any circumstances, I learned this very harsh lesson years ago, is that the rest of the world doesn't give a crap about your problems. Whatever your problems are, I'm sorry. They just don't. So if you continue to lead generate, that's the key. If you continue to generate leads, the thing you have to avoid as a business under any circumstance is what I call the feast and famine syndrome. I have no business, so I sell and market. I'm like, wow, I got a lot of clients now. Then I get into fulfillment, so I stop selling and marketing. And I'm busy fulfilling the orders and doing all the programs. And then you finish up those projects and you're like, oh, great. Wait a minute. I don't have any clients. Why? Because I haven't been marketing and selling. So you get into selling and marketing mode. And that's a hard hamster wheel to get off. Even if you're about to say to me, yeah, but Carl, I only have a part-time business. Doesn't matter. You full-time sell and market. And by full-time, you spend 90 minutes a day promoting, building, marketing, and selling your services. That's it. That's what full-time means. It just has to be consistent. Because guess what happens? Ask BlackBerry what happens when you stop speaking to your customers and making relevant products and services. See how fast, right? If you ever invested in a stock goes up slow, but it drops like a stone. That's what happens when you stop selling and marketing in your business. It drops like a stone, and you know what? Your customers have other lives. They're going to move on, and somebody else is going to start dating your customer.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how good you are, because for those of us that used Blackberries, we know that they were the best phones. They had the best technology, the best hardware, the best software. It worked.
By
It was
far.
secure. It was wonderful, but they stopped promoting. And by the time iPhone hit the market, and then BlackBerry came out with their touch screen. Actually, they were the ones that invented haptic touch on the screen. You remember that, right? They were the ones that invented when you touched it, still felt like a button. But they didn't market it right, and now they're gone. I think they're gone. Is RIM still around?
They're a business. What they were the best at was security software,
Yeah,
and so they still are active in that regard. But as a phone company, a device company, they're irrelevant. They made a little bit of a comeback, and it's just, and there's still room if they were committed. But you know what? They're not as committed.
Yeah, well, I would think that in terms of security right now, people would think that if a phone company came out and said, we are the most secure phone, Google's not listening, Apple's not listening, nobody's listening, it's secure, you can send messages securely, nobody's listening, that I'm buying that phone, because I've accepted the fact that this thing is listening to me all the time. I hate that it's doing it, but I've accepted. What am I going to do? I don't have any options.
Yeah, it's a point of life. Now, overall, I would agree with you. So if they would sell that feature and sell it hard, the people that they cared about it would take them up on it. Overall, probably a topic for another day is people don't care about security as much as you would think, right? And that, if you think about it, and that's why when RIM was trying to sell us on security, they were trying to sell us something that was important to them, but not as important to enough people. Security is only important to us when we get broken into. Now, I'm not saying for everybody, because there's some people where security all the time is important. That's why way back when, all of our presidents and all of their cabinet and government used RIM because it was the safest network. Best encryption across the board. But for the most part, when it comes to security, people have proven they're not as interested in it unless they get broken into. I mean, if you think about it, how much more information do we give to Facebook than we do when we're applying for a mortgage? To give you an idea. Oh yeah, you want to know what my favorite band is? Where I am. People will post in real time where they are. Like, hey, I'm traveling abroad. Well, don't you own a house? Yeah, I'm not there. Like, they put themselves at risk constantly.
Yeah, I think about that because I was just on a 9-day motorcycle trip, and I posted stories every single day where I was. And one person said, like, that you're advertising you're not home. Like, yeah, but nobody knows what's at my house. Like, my daughter's still here, my dog's still here, the security system. Like, it's all good. I'm not worried about it. But it is a point of consideration. So let me ask you this, because Stephen Covey, hero of mine, never met him, of course. He passed away before I was able to have the pleasure of meeting him. But his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I read through for the first time in 2020 during the world meltdown. Everything's going nuts. I read that book, and I recorded 52 videos on that book and put them on my YouTube channel. They're still out there. They suck, but they're there. You can go look at them. Did you have the pleasure of working with him directly? I imagine you did, because you wrote a book together. And if so, tell me a little bit about something you learned from him, because that guy really set me on a course for a new life.
Yeah, I did have the pleasure of meeting him. And you're right. He was a smart guy, solid as a rock, really integral, grounded, believed in what he said, truly believed in what he said, wanted to make a difference, very inspiring guy. And we lost him way too soon. He got injured in a bicycle accident, and we lost him way too soon. But his legacy still lives on. I mean, one of the things that I learned from him is that there are universal principles that guide us, that we can aspire to. And we can take those universal guiding principles and we can adapt and customize them for ourselves. So when he says begin with the end in mind, that might mean something different for you as it does for me. Yet that same guiding principle can help catapult both of us to success.
Mm.
And we can utilize that in our own way. So that's what I really liked about what he created was it was not only relevant to just about anybody, but it was also customizable to just about anybody as well.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal book. It's one of the books that if anybody says, "Hey, is there a book I should read?" That is on my list of
It's got to be
probably
on the list.
It's
Required
on the
reading.
list. I mean, I'm in the metaphysical world now, reading a lot of those books, Psycho-Cybernetics, the Three Magic Words. Those are, The Science of Getting Rich. Those are some books that are on my list now. But that is a classic. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People has got to be a book to read. Now, speaking of books, I want to give you a chance before we finish up today. I want to give you a chance to talk about your books. You've got your Biz Dev Done Right became a #1 bestseller in 2016. And then you also have your other book was, I'm looking at the name of it, right? What was it? What's the name of your first one?
7 Stages of Small Business Success.
There it is. There are 7 stages of small business success, which lays out the formula for hyper growth. Tell us a little bit about those books, where we can find them, why we should read them.
Sure. So the 7 stages was in the early 90s when I was putting together structure and coaching and consulting structures and systems. For me, it became the book in 2010. And it's really the cornerstone of the methodology that we use to grow and hyper grow our clients. Biz Dev Done Right. I was sitting with a client and colleague, and we were and she does door opening and executive appointment setting, and we were joking around. Oh my gosh, our clients, they get right to the finish line with their business development, then they screw it up. We should write a book, which then became a book. And so Biz Dev, if you read it, Biz Dev is spelt wrong, and the words done right is spelt right, because we show you where you're making your mistakes and how you can correct those mistakes.
Love it. And they can pick that up where?
Amazon. You can get both on Amazon, or you can go to carlgould.com or any one of my websites, carl360.com or 7stageadvisors.com, and the books are available there.
Carl Gould, it's Gould, Carl, C-A-R-L, carlgould.com. Go check that out. Carl, I'm going to give you the last word today on the root of all success. What would you like to tell everybody on our way out?
Well, since this is the root of all success, the root of success for you is to understand that whatever your product or service is, there's a market for it. Right? But you have to get really clear about your market. And more, what we're learning is, and with more connectivity, and you can reach more people, not only is there a market for what you do, but your client is getting more and more educated, and they can tell the difference between somebody who's doing business out of convenience and someone who's really committed. You really do have to understand, get under the hood of who your ideal client is and speak directly to them, because they can tell the difference. And they will unfairly reward somebody who's committed and speaks their language, and you will be unfairly punished when you don't. And so we live in that world now of the most educated consumer that there has ever been in history, and they will reward you for the extra effort you put in. So just go that little extra for your ideal client avatar, and they will reward you handsomely.
Love it, Carl. Thank you for being on the show, man. Congratulations on all your success and to your future success. I wish you the best.
Thanks, Jason.
Well, there you have it. We got a guy that's been working with people like Tony Robbins, Ken Blanchard, Stephen Covey. This guy has worked with some of the top coaches and authors in the world. So go back and listen to some of those things he was talking about. He really values hustling, and he kept saying commitment. I know he used the word hustle to describe it, and I didn't really ask him to clarify, but he kept saying commitment. And I think that really is a key for you to take home today. Are you really committed? Because the committed person who really follows through with what he or she has said will always outperform the person who's better looking, better educated, better connected, whatever. It's the person who's committed and actually does it, who's consistent in that commitment, as he called it, hustle. Living life on your own terms. He defines success, living life on your own terms, being able to do what you want, when you want, where you want, with whom you want, as often as you want. And that, in fact, is one of the great definitions of success that I hear on this show all the time. And if you're not living that ideal life, I want you to go to my website and take my free business burnout test. It's free, completely free. You're going to hear about this in the outro, the bumper music, but you can go to businessburnouttest.com and take that, because it's time for you to get past the burnout of running a business and get to the life you desire, to get to the place where you can actually begin enjoying the freedom that you wanted when you first started your company. Thanks to Carl for being on the show. Let me tell you how to get in touch with Carl. You can go to the number 7stageadvisors.com. That's 7stageadvisors.com. You can also find him on Facebook at facebook.com/carl.l.gould. So it's Carl L. Gould. Just put the dots between his initials, and Gould is spelled Gould. Big thanks to Carl for being on the show. Thank you for blessing us with your presence, for sharing with us your stories, and for everybody watching or listening to this. Remember, this is on YouTube. This is on all the podcast players out there. And I'm really happy that you're. Thank you for doing this. It means the world to me that you listen to the show. Thank you so much. Until next time, I'm the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. Are you an entrepreneur who feels trapped in the weeds of daily operations, not experiencing the freedom you thought you'd have as a business owner? Want to know the way out? Take Jason's free exit readiness assessment to see how close you are to getting ready to experience true freedom and success as an entrepreneur. Go to amireadytoexit.com today. That's amireadytoexit.com. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.